This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. A busy Tuesday. Let's begin this half hour in the Middle East, where tensions are rising between Iran, Israel, and the United States. Threats are flying. At the same time, Israel continues to try to negotiate a hostage ceasefire deal with Hamas. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has more now. She's reporting from Jerusalem.
Iran is ramping up the rhetoric and threatening U.S. forces in the region.
The Americans have at least 10 bases and 50,000 forces near Iran. This means they are sitting in a glass room. Someone sitting in a glass room would not throw rocks at others.
Iran's supreme leader promised retaliation after Trump threatened to attack Iran if they don't agree to a nuclear deal.
But if they do, they will definitely receive a firm reciprocal blow.
He also called for the destruction of Israel.
It's a religious, moral, and human duty for everyone to work toward removing this wicked criminal entity from the region.
Despite all the tough talk, Trump's still holding out hope Iran is going to come around.
I can't imagine them doing anything else but making a deal. I would prefer a deal to the other alternative, which I think everybody in this plane knows what that is. And that's not going to be pretty, and I do not prefer that.
Ben Cohen of the Foundation for Defense of Democracy says Iran has so much uranium ready to go into nuclear bombs, Israel and the U.S. can't just sit by.
You've got a situation now where Iran has about 275 kilograms of weapons-grade enriched uranium. That is very risky. And so, yes, of course, every day that goes by without some kind of diplomatic resolution whereby Iran effectively surrenders its nuclear facilities and its nuclear program, every day that that doesn't happen, we get closer to a military strike.
Monday, Trump announced details of an upcoming trip to the Middle East.
It could be next month, maybe a little bit later, yeah. And we're going to Qatar. And also we're going to possibly a couple of other countries. UAE is very important. And Saudi Arabia, the three of them. And then we'll go other places also. But in the Middle East, those seem to be the three.
Meanwhile, Israel and Hamas are trying to work out a new ceasefire deal. Israel is demanding 11 more hostages, but Hamas is offering only 5. The Israeli military is continuing to expand its operations against Hamas as negotiations continue. The IDF warns civilians in Rafah to flee before it hits targets there. Some civilians have just plain had it with the war.
We are dying. There is no food, no drink, no electricity, no medicine. People are being displaced. Where do we go?
On Monday, the IDF said it had destroyed a more than half-mile Hamas tunnel route and located a workshop for producing rockets and launchers. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem for a closer look at all the unfolding issues. So, Chris, what are some of the terms being discussed in the hostage negotiations?
Well, Ephraim, some of the terms on the Israeli side is Israel is proposing a 40 to 50-day truce to release about half of the remaining hostages, that would both living and dead. Prime Minister Netanyahu emphasizes during the negotiations that he wants to keep on the military pressure on Hamas while the talks go on. They also insist on Hamas disarming. On the other side, Hamas is saying they will agree, as Julie said in her report, 5 living Israeli hostages and also Idan Alexander, an Israeli-American. They're calling for a 50-day ceasefire and a release of more Palestinian prisoners and a facilitation of aid back into Gaza. And also on the Israeli side, to put more pressure on Hamas, Israel plans to take up to 25% of Gaza territory. Now, that's probably a real game changer for Hamas, who sees that territory as their lifeblood and the way they can remain in power.
Chris, what is the most recent threat from Iran if the U.S. does attack?
Well, an advisor to Iran's supreme leader says, if you attack, we'll just go ahead and make a nuclear weapon. It's kind of ironic. They say that they don't want a nuclear weapon. They say there's a fatwa against it, and they're going along with the IAEA, the UN Atomic Agency. But it doesn't seem to ring true for many people looking at Iran right now. The major question, I think, Ephraim, and it was reported there in Julie's story, are they weaponizing uranium now? And a long time, for years, they've been enriching uranium, but weaponizing uranium takes it to a whole new level. And so where many people ask where we are now, where the stakes are quite high, closer to U.S. military action. And the time for diplomacy is closing, and the time when Israel and perhaps the U.S. Take action to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, which would give Iran a nuclear umbrella over the entire Middle East and Israel. Right now, Israel seems to be waiting for the U.S. diplomatic process to go through and for President Trump to continue his diplomacy and trying to get Iran to the negotiating table. It doesn't seem to be working, but that threat of military action is out there right now so Iran has to consider that right now. It's very, very serious for both sides.
Indeed. What more have you learned about the crackdown by Hamas in Gaza?
Well, it's a tragic story, Ephraim, and it was told through a man named Uday al-Rabai. He blamed Hamas for the disaster in Gaza. He recorded a video. He warned Hamas was after him for coming against and criticizing Hamas. So he was in hiding. However, Hamas captured him. They tortured him, dragged his body through the streets. His father's blaming Hamas for his murder. And you can see all this on Palestinian Media Watch, who released this video. They call it the death of dissent. Just one more tragic history in how Hamas refuses to let anyone criticize them. And if they do, there are tragic and deadly consequences.
Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you so much for your insight. As always, we look forward to hearing from you more in the days ahead. Want to turn now to Myanmar. Search and rescue crews continue looking for survivors after a powerful earthquake hit the area last Friday. The Asian nation suffered a 7.7 magnitude quake followed by strong aftershocks. Now, more than 2,000 people are dead, including 50 children, from a preschool classroom that crumbled. The death toll number is expected to rise. Back here at home, Catholic Charities wants the High Court to resolve a tax dispute it has with the state of Wisconsin, asking the Supreme Court justices to reverse a Wisconsin Supreme Court decision that describes its work as, quote, not typical religious activity. And the only way it could receive an exemption from the state unemployment tax would be to hire only Catholics and try to convert the people it serves. Across the ideological spectrum, concerns the state went too far in unlawfully discriminating based on religious beliefs under the First Amendment.
Is Wisconsin going to go around and this soup kitchen? You know, you have to go. You have to go to the service before you get your good. They're good to go. But that one, they just invite you to the service after the soup. They're bad. I mean, is really that's the? I would have thought this would entangle the state in religion a whole lot more than a non-discrimination rule between religions.
The court's opinion is expected this summer in June or early July, with far-reaching implications, however it rules. Coming up, she went from hitting softball in high school to playing hardball with the press corps. Karoline Leavitt isn't backing down from the tough questions in the briefing room. We're going to sit down with Trump's brand new press secretary. Stay with us. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. At 27, she speaks for the most powerful man on the planet. Karoline Leavitt is the youngest White House press secretary in America's history. She recently told CBN News there's a higher power behind her success. Chief political analyst David Brody has her story.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are we?
At the relatively young age of 27, Karoline Leavitt approaches the White House podium with confidence and a smile. Don't let her age fool you, though. She has proved to be unflappable, as those in the press room can attest.
Have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have.
I think it's insulting that you are trying to test my knowledge of economics and the decisions that this president has made.
Her approach is no nonsense and fearless.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. You doing all right?
Good, yeah.
In our one-on-one sit-down, Leavitt tells me how she draws that strength immediately before each briefing.
I think that team prayer before is just a moment to be silent and still and ask God for confidence and the ability to articulate my words, knowledge, prayer, protection. And it is a nice moment to reset. It's the last thing I do before I go out there, and then it just gives me the confidence to do a briefing.
That confidence comes from a childhood filled with love from blue-collar parents growing up in New Hampshire.
I think that value of hard work and determination and drive was instilled in me at a very young age just by watching my parents work so hard to earn a living.
She adds how Catholic education instilled discipline and shaped who she is today.
My faith is incredibly important to me. I would argue now more than ever, being in a role that is very demanding and at times controversial, and there's a lot of public pressure and discussion online about who you are and your family, and it could be difficult for someone who doesn't have faith, but with faith, all things are possible.
Sports played a role as well.
Yeah!
She excelled on her high school softball team and received a scholarship from St. Anselm College in Manchester.
All right, I was going through box scores of the college softball St. Anselm team. I was literally seeing, I saw you got a couple of home runs.
They weren't very good.
Good enough, though, to be third on the team in home runs that she's hitting today.
The game of softball and sports prepared me for the game of politics, no doubt about it. Discipline, hard work, teamwork, and also competing against yourself to be the best that you can in athletics, I think has prepared me, especially for this job now. I can have a good briefing, but the next day I can go on television. I have to perform again, right? So every day is a new game in this job.
She wouldn't even be in her current job, however, without bumps along the way.
I'm Karoline Leavitt, and I'm running for Congress.
She ran for Congress in 2022 and lost the general election.
Well, certainly God has a plan for everyone. I believe that firmly. So God knew what he was doing, I believe, and you just have to trust the process and trust that he's working in your life and stay grounded in your faith throughout the way.
She leans on that faith inside the briefing room as questions come fast and furious from all directions.
Is there any evidence on that he wasn't aware of it? You're a reporter. You should find out.
When you call on reporters, are you already kind of gaming out in your head, oh, okay, I know where they're going to go today? Do you kind of think that through?
Oftentimes the questions are predictable.
Do you believe political journalism is dead in America today?
I think there are true journalists out there that still exist. They are few and far between. I think many people in the briefing room here are trying out for their next big show. So I think the media has had to take a look in the mirror, especially after President Trump's resounding victory on November 5th. And the American public sent a very strong message to the anti-Trump media that we don't listen to you.
Legacy media often still push back. New York Times reporter Peter Baker has complained of losing direct access to the president if they print something the White House doesn't like.
That is utter fallacy and completely ridiculous. We have expanded the pool to new voices, independent journalists, podcasters, social media content creators, while continuing to invite legacy media outlets like the one Peter Baker works for, the New York Times, are still in the briefing room, still have access to the press pool, and we are going to continue to move forward with this method.
In the middle of these ongoing battles, this administration is also facing rogue judges that it sees as trying to stop the Trump agenda. Leavitt labels them part of the resistance movement.
Absolutely. Almost every single one of them is a registered Democrat, has been involved in Democrat campaigns or causes, have donated to Democrat candidates. Some of them have even put their anti-Trump bias on social media. They have not been shy about their hatred for this president and his policies, and they are abusing their judicial power.
She also sees a much larger fight taking place, the one between good and evil.
I certainly believe in spiritual warfare, and I think I saw it firsthand, especially throughout the campaign trail with President Trump. And I think there certainly were evil forces, and I think that the president was saved by the grace of God on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania, and he's in this moment for a reason.
While that event is seen as a miracle, many believe Leavitt pulls one off each and every day at her high-level role that includes being a full-time mom to an 8-month-old baby boy.
It's certainly challenging. There's no doubt about it. I think every working mother understands the demands, and no matter where you are or what you're doing, there is a sense of guilt. But I spend every second that I possibly can with my son when I'm home. On weekends and evenings, I try to make it home for bedtime as much as I can throughout the week.
Which doesn't leave too much time for sleep.
I'm going 4 hours, and I think that's high. I think it's less. What's the over-under? What do you get in a night? Come on.
Oh, man, it's a little bit over, actually.
Oh, good.
It's usually about 5 to 6 hours a night is what I'm doing, which is all we need. As President Trump says, when you love your job and you love your life, you don't need to sleep much.
While awake, she soldiers on, despite critics taking shots at her.
They want to define Karoline Leavitt. How does Karoline Leavitt define Karoline Leavitt?
Oh, man, that's a very interesting question.
What kind of tree would you like to be, Karoline? No.
Oh, man. I hope people just view me as a hard worker who wants to get the job done, and a good mother and good at my job. And I think that question has yet to be seen. We've only been here 2 months, David. Yeah. We'll sit down again in 4 years.
And we'll check back on her journey navigating a whole new world. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Despite America's wealth, the United States remains one of the least healthy industrialized nations. Many experts point to our food. On this week's episode of The Healthy Living, you'll meet a woman who has been researching the issue for decades. She's sharing her wisdom.
It was my youngest daughter. I have 3 daughters. And she said, we were eating salad at the table, and I said, oh, isn't this wonderful food? And she said, look at the back of the bottle, Mom, and see what's in there. And there was nothing I could pronounce except for soy. And I was like, oh, no. So I went to the computer and looked to see what was in there. And it was like MSG. It had all these chemicals in it that I couldn't pronounce. And so I started researching what those chemicals were. And they were really horrible for your body, especially your internal organs. So I just was like, oh, no, because I had known for quite a long number of years that they had modified our food in 1984. And that's when I started the research and really bore down on what we were putting in our mouths, because I had seen the results from my parents and my siblings of what they ate, and I didn't want to end up like that. So they both had Alzheimer's and dementia, and it was definitely from the food supply.
Well, we know that the United States is one of the least healthy countries in the entire world, and experts do blame that on the food we eat. But then, regular people, you go to the grocery store and the food seems safe and everybody's eating them. I mean, it's kind of hard to get motivated to change. How bad are the foods for us? Like most foods that you'd find in a grocery store, how devastating are they?
Well, you don't want to eat processed food because it is full of additives. If you turn it over and look on the ingredient label and you can't read what's on the ingredient label and understand what that food is, don't eat that. We all have a computer in our hands. The phone is a wonderful instrument for finding out the truth about what we eat.
If people were just eating the standard American diet, which most folks are, what would be the first thing that you would tell them to change? Because it's a little overwhelming to go from eating terrible to great.
It took me a long time to modify my food, but the first thing you want to do is change your bread. They put so much horrible stuff in our bread. It's unbelievable. For one thing, the wheat has all been modified with glucosamate. And glucosamate is actually Roundup. And they've done this to all of our base ingredients, all of them, soy, alfalfa. So it ends up in the meat, it ends up in the milk, it ends up in our bread. Especially the bread, because if they use the regular flour, that flour has been genetically modified by Roundup 3 times before it ever gets into the bread. They also have azobicarbonate in the bread, which actually causes asthma in children, and they know this, and they continue to put it in the bread. and it makes the bread look pretty, but it causes asthma in our children. Our rates went up 500% right after they added that, within the year after they added the azobicarbonate in our bread. And if you go overseas to Asia, they'll put you in jail for 14 years and give you a $250,000 fine for putting azobicarbonate in your bread. So you look for azobicarbon. That's the chemical you do not want in your bread, especially if you have children.
Well, what kind of bread do you recommend then?
I have a recipe in my little book. I have been making this for probably 15 years.
Find out more about what to eat, what to avoid, and why on this week's edition of Healthy Living. You can find it today on the CBN News Channel, this afternoon at 2:30, this evening at 8:30 Eastern. You could also see it on CBN's News app or watch on YouTube. Stay with us. Your Tuesday Tweetable is coming up next. It's a record-breaking opening weekend for The Chosen Last Supper. The series made its first theatrical release this past weekend and came in number 3 at the box office, pulling in $11.5 million in theaters around the country. This marks the best premiere for the series since it began debuting in theaters. Part 2 of the popular series is in theaters April 4th, followed by the third installment on April 11th. And this week, Studio 5 will have more of The Chosen, including a sit-down interview with series creator Dallas Jenkins. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. This is a message I pray blesses you. I also pray you will post, tag, tweet, and share it with those in your circles of influence. Stop waiting to do that hard thing. You don't need inspiration to take action. It's action that triggers inspiration. So get started, and the inspiration will eventually follow. After all, it's discipline that delivers real results. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time. You can also find them online. That address is cbnnews.com. Take a moment. Let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us. That address is newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. We'll see you back here tomorrow, same time. Goodbye. God bless.